Welcome everyone to Fuel the Conversation, a podcast for fuel people by fuel people. It's a live podcast, and Kyle and I are really excited to be here today. My name is Freddie Riddler. I'm head of business growth at RCC, and I read it like I didn't know that. But yeah, I would like to introduce Kyle Sheehan, who is the head of sales in Mogo. Kyle, I always ask you, how are we doing this week?
Oh man, I think everybody behind us can attest. It's been a week so far, right? Lots of learning, and a ton of fun. We even had a random singing sighting last night, just so everyone's aware. And it took, what, 20 years?
I think I'm going to say 20 gins.
Oh, that too, yeah. There's probably 20 gins in 20 years to get a Tara singing sighting.
No, there's no hangover there for her today. She's fine. There's no hangover.
She's here shaking her head no.
She did it for a good cause. She did it for Walk in the Park.
She knew when she got done singing, she goes, "This is going to haunt me forever." I'm like, "Yep."
And just and people back at the office would be bugging me a little bit if I didn't say it, but if people watching the podcast down in the future, if you want a cookbook, they have an RCC Terminators cookbook with recipes from RCC staff. So if you're interested in getting a cookbook, you can email, we're going to do Francie at rccbi.com, and they'll tell you how much it is, and they'll mail you a cookbook if you're interested in that.
Yeah. And that might have been the reason why Tara sang last night, because she decided if we raised so much money, she would sing. And it took Bummy about 5-6 seconds to meet that goal. So thanks to all of our wonderful customers. But today is not about Tara or Jen or dancing or singing or Terminators. It's about Susie, who is our CEO.
Yeah.
And this week is special for a lot of us. And it's her send-off as a retired, long-lasting CEO and mother to more than just the RCC family. So Susie, would you like to introduce yourself and say hi to all of our guests?
Hello, everyone. I'm Susie Sheehan-Peterson, mother of 2 other staff at RCC, Holly and Abby, and aunt to Kyle and Jess. But I think I just feel overall kind of a mother to the whole RCC family. Enjoy it a lot.
I think a lot of our customers would say it to our whole industry.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we're going to start with is tell us about the Sheehan family.
Oh my.
We have lots of time. It's okay.
It's a podcast / therapy session.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we'll see how that goes. So Fabe and Lorraine, our mom and dad. And then I come from a family of 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls. You know, in the Sheehans, we were always competitive. And so, we had to make sure everything's equal. And actually, your generation is equal too. Equal number of boys and girls, even in 2nd generation. Of course, we're still working on the 3rd. But I actually have 3 sisters, which a lot of people don't know because they have lived out of state for years. And so they're the 3 oldest. And so I grew up between the 4 boys. So I was tomboy. So we have three girls, 3 boys, and then a girl and a boy again. And so, my sisters were just too much older. I didn't have anybody to play dolls with me. I didn't like to play dolls. I wanted to play baseball. And I think it just came from growing up between the boys, And of course, I had 3 brothers ahead of me. And so by the time I got to school, the nuns were like, "Oh my goodness, thank God, not another Sheehan boy. We have a Sheehan girl this time." So apparently the boys were a little more rambunctious than the girls. But Dad started the propane business in the 50s, and all of us, did some form or another of work through Sheehan's Gas. But yeah, we're a close-knit family, even though 4 of us live out of state, 4 of us live in state. We still get together as often as possible, which sometimes is only once every 2 years is when we have a Sheehan reunion, which somebody asked me what I'm going to be doing after I'm done. And I'm like, well, I'm retired June 30th, and we have a Sheehan reunion June 30th to July 3rd. So there you go. Doesn't that sound fun?
Already planning your life.
Yeah, I guess.
So what led to Grandpa starting the propane business?
He was in heating and plumbing before that, and he was an entrepreneur, and he would watch. He was a good businessman. He would watch for opportunities and saw propane out there and thought, I think this is something for the future. And so he decided to get into it. And of course, I was one of the younger ones, so I don't have as much of memory when he started. But of course, the older siblings tell stories. I think it was Kevin or Joe ride in. He had a little bulk truck. I don't remember how many gallons it was. And he would have to drive to Montevideo each day, would be what, 35, 40 miles? He would have to drive each day to Montevideo to pick up his gas and drive back and then deliver it and repeat, rinse the next day again. So yeah, he just saw an opportunity. He really was an entrepreneur. And of course he was doing his own business anyway as a plumber, electrician. Although being an electrician and being colorblind is a little challenging. You know, he would take usually one of us kids with them to tell them what color the wires were. And of course, yeah, you'll hear this again. I'm sure this is the theme. My older sister, Pat, was the prankster of all of us. And so she thought it would be funny to tell him the wrong color one time. And so he put them together and got zapped, you know, and he went, probably won't invite Pat along any longer anymore. But so he kind of was his own entrepreneur already. But I think he just saw the writing on the wall and thought, propane, that looks like a really good deal. I'm going to start that up. And so, I mean, he started it from nothing. So it was pretty cool.
In this industry, we kind of know that when you start a business like that, family is heavily involved in those small early years of that business. So what roles and positions have you played in the propane business, in the family business throughout growing up in the years?
Yeah. You know, I think in those years, I was born in 56, so somewhere in the 60s, I suppose, you know, the guys did the hauling and I actually was in the office most of the time. So I think I got my early love of bookkeeping and in those early years, just helping him do the books in the office. And, you know, it's interesting because people talk about these card systems. I remember my dad, when he would bring the delivery tickets in, you'd file them. Well, his file cabinets were these great big huge, I bet they were probably 4 feet by 4 feet, heavier than sin, iron vaults that you'd like lift up the top, and then there'd be little clips in there for here are the A's, here are the B's, there are the C's, and that's how we'd file the invoices away. So that was one of my jobs. And as I got older, I could do more things, you know, never had computers, of course, back then. So it was just hand bookkeeping systems. So those were most of my roles. And of course, when we were younger, we had to clean the appliances because we had appliances for sale. So it was dusting, clean the appliances. None of it, me included, never wanted to clean out the back of the office. That was like where everything, a lot of dust, a lot of dirt, a lot of, so I pretty much just stayed in the showroom to clean. But yeah, that was pretty much my role. Of course, the boys did painting tanks and eventually could do service and did a lot of that work in the propane industry. But, you know, I had it made. A lot of my friends were out in the field doing corn detasseling, and I got to be in an air-conditioned office all summer long. Yeah. And of course, as we were growing up, part of the way we'd see Dad, because he was busy, you know, starting his own business and working hard. So we would all ride in the propane truck with Dad, of course. And so one of my favorite stories is when I came back to work for RCC, the first convention I went to after that, I think it was in New Orleans, and, you know, they have the bulk trucks on the floor. And so I hopped up in one of the bulk trucks just to see how they'd changed over the years. I haven't been in a bulk truck for a long time. And so I hopped up and Brian was outside and I looked at Brian and said, "Oh my gosh, Brian, they have passenger seats in the trucks now." And Brian looked at me and he said, "Susie, they always had passenger seats. Dad was just too cheap to get passenger seats or radios." So we always sat on the hard metal. And I just thought that's the way all propane trucks were built, that you sat on the hard metal. But yeah, but years later, they had us write our memories down as children. I think it was for our mom and dad's 50th anniversary, which, by the way, they were married for 70 years.
Wow.
Before Dad passed away. But at their 50th, I think they had us write our memories. We were 8 for 8. All 8 of us kids wrote down that we remembered one of our fondest memories was riding in the bulk truck with Dad. Now, whether it was because we're on the hard metal, I don't know, but they said it was their favorite memory. So 8 for 8, every child, even though we wrote our memories out separately, we all really enjoyed riding the bulk truck with Dad.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's funny you say file cabinets. I know there's people behind me that probably still do it. If you're listening, get imaging. All right, moving on.
I would agree. Those suckers were having.
When you were talking about them, I could see some nods going on this direction. But yeah, that's funny to hear that. In 70 years too. I know Steve was asking the group yesterday, you know, how long they're in the propane industry, how long they've been married. Yeah. 7 years. That's a lifetime.
Yeah, it really was.
Incredible.
Yeah, they did a great job.
So let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about when Mike decided to pursue his career working for Sheehan's, and Brian and Kevin helping the business out with their development of RCC.
Right. Yes. So I don't know what year it was that Mike took it over, but when Mike took over the business, and they didn't do a ton of planning, I don't think, for it. I think it was just something that was expected over the years. Well, Mike and Joe both attended, I would call it propane school. I don't know what it was, but it was in Georgia. They both went off to like a trade school after high school. So they were there for, I think, 2 years. They both attended the trade school. And then when our brother Joe came back, he decided he decided to get a job for 3M, which left Mike. And I don't know which came first. If somebody said Mike's going to run the company, Joe, you better find something to do, or if he had decided that first, I'm not sure which. But yeah, the decision was made that Mike was going to take over the company. And when the time came, I don't think it was any big deal. I don't think anybody sat down and visited with him like we're doing today, but that's okay. But he just wanted to do things different than Dad. He wanted to take it to another level. He wanted to just, and so he really wanted the technology side of it.
Mhm.
And our brother Kevin at that time was a developer, a programmer for Honeywell, maybe. Anyway, Wilma Poultry. There you go. Thank you. And so he, Mike approached him and said, well, can you create a software program for me? And so, yeah, the boys started, they, created a very basic program, but it did what it needed to do. And I don't remember how long it took. That's probably a question for Brian, but I don't think it took terribly long. So they really did create it just for Mike. And when he started using it, then they had people in the industry saying, well, where'd you get that? How can you do that? And so they decided, well, if it worked for Mike, maybe it could work for other people nationally. And I don't know what year they went to their first convention in Atlanta, but then after that, everything was kind of history. They started out, and there's some pretty cool stories about some of the first years that they were at the NPGA convention in Atlanta. How do you get this hardware there? It wasn't small hardware like now. How do you get that there and what it costs to get it there? And, they made some early on mistakes of how to get all that hardware there and get it running, but they figured it out and eventually started selling it nationally and internationally after that.
So while Dad and Kevin were off and working with Mike and starting this up, you were still in the community, right? You were still around Rhode Island and Olympia area.
Yes, yeah. I actually went for after I graduated high school, I went for a year. I was going to be a pharmacist, and I went for a year to Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. And then, of course, my boyfriend was a farmer, and it was easier to move me back to the farm than to try to move the farm to where I was. So I shifted gears a little bit and finished up with an accounting 2-year program nearby, and decided, if I'm going to switch, I may as well do something that's useful in the area. And so I switched over to accounting and got a 2-year degree. Trade school, of course, back then, VOTEX were really popular. So yeah, I was able to just get through a quick program and be able to do some bookkeeping and accounting after that. So that was kind of my forte after that. But I just remember being in high school and really liking the bookkeeping class and thought, oh, I could do that. So that's what I did. Went there and thought that was a good spot for me.
So everyone's asking, how in the world did you end up with Brian and Kevin working at RCC?
How did I end up there?
Mhm.
I actually, when I finished my bookkeeping degree, in the meantime, I had worked for the drugstore in town. And then his wife decided to open up a small department store right next door to the drugstore. And so I had worked for them while I was in school. And then she ran it for probably another year or two. And I had helped her in the department store. But when I say department store, I mean like 1,500 square feet, super tiny, but a little bit of everything because we're a small town, right? And so I worked for them for a couple of years, and then they moved out of town. And so they sold the business to me. So I ended up running that store for 20 years and opened another one about 15 miles away in Renville. So I ended up learning my customer service skills through retail. I was in a small town. We all knew each other. You needed to have some pretty good customer service skills to be able to make it in a small town. And then, of course, I needed something to be able to keep track of my sales, what I sold, what I needed to order. So I went to the boys at some point in time and said, can I just use your software? I I can't afford it. So can I just use it? And they let me do that. So I actually used all the accounting modules in RCC for years before I came on board. But anyway, to answer your question, in 96, 97, we had a terrible snowstorm. I owned my own building, by the way. I bought the building that the store was in, and then I bought the building next door and expanded to 3,000 square feet. So now I've got two 1,500 square feet building that have flat roofs, flat tar roofs, and we live in Minnesota where we get a lot of snow. And so the winter of 96, 97 was an awfully snowy year. And that year, and of course I'd shovel my own snow that year, and I had apartments up above one of my stores. And that year I ended up throwing so much snow. At one point, I was shoveling snow and throwing it higher than me, and I'm 5'9". And I just said, there must be something better than this. The maintaining of the buildings, I think, was the most difficult thing. I loved working with people, but the maintaining of flat roof buildings and having to have them retarred and all that fun stuff. And finally that year, I just said, I need to be done. I just don't think I can do the maintenance side anymore. I love the people side, love the bookkeeping side, but I thought that, and of course, when you're working in retail, you're working hours that other people are off. So having a family, I'd work some nights and weekends, just one night, but it still was something I thought would be fun to not have to do those hours. And so the accounting firm in Rhode Island, the gentleman came in one day and said, you know what? He said, I heard you kind of want to get out of this. He said, I'd really like your building. And that's all he had to say. I could have bent down and kissed his feet and said, yes, you can. Yes, I'd be happy to sell my buildings to you. That would be wonderful. But before I said anymore, I said, you have to hold on. So I called Brian or Kevin, one of them, and said, they had told me once that if anytime I wanted to come, they'd take me. And so I called them and said, does that offer still stand? And they're like, yep. So I said, hey, you know what? I'll be there. Yep.
By the way, I think Abby must have jumped for joy for that one too, because I heard that she gained her love of inventory counts through your retail business.
That's how come I can tell all of you that I know inventory is a beast, because I had two stores, both of them about 3,000 square feet. And I tracked every piece of inventory that I had, right down to many different sizes of zippers, because we had threads, because at that time people sewed. So I had every size of zippers, threads, small spools, large spools, you name it. They were all inventoried in the RCC system. And at that time, I kept trying to convince the boys we needed a barcode, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it never came until I was at RCC for like 10 years before we got barcode scanning. So I had to sit down every night and key them in by hand. My staff would write down what they sold, the inventory number, and I would key it all in at night. But then I could track my inventory. So when I say I know inventory is a beast, I got it. I know it is.
So that building, for context, was actually right across the street from Grandpa's propane shop and Dad and Kevin's RCC business, which is now above the propane shop because it's grown from the little humble back room of the propane company up to the top floor. So I know that with an even number of owners, there were sometimes head-to-heads that occurred.
Yeah, there weren't too many. So because there were only two of them and majority rules, there's no majority. Kevin, of course, liked to play, well, I'm the older one, it should be mine. But they did decide early on that if they had disagreements, that they would need a third party to break the tie. And so I would be working across the street, great big picture windows out front, and I could see them coming across the street, and I thought, oh my, here we go. They didn't do it many times, but when I saw them coming across, I thought, oh, I think we have a tiebreaker coming. They would both come across, each would give their side of the story, and then I would vote in whichever way it was. And they were good about it. They never held, well, I shouldn't say never. Most of the time they didn't hold grudges. I think Kevin did once, but he really thought his way was right. But they went with the majority rules, and we did it after that. I also don't know if you ever know, my building across the street where I had the retail store was actually Dad's original propane. Wasn't the original one, but it was Dad's propane store. So I ended up washing those windows as a child. Oh yeah, I got to wash windows too. I ended up washing those picture windows as a child, and as an adult, I'm washing the same picture windows. But at least I owned the building at that time. But yeah, one of those buildings was his where we worked as kids in the propane. He had the big picture windows because you had all the appliances up front.
Yep.
So yeah, you'd walk in. So I didn't move far.
So if anyone's wondering why we don't have the seminar in January in Minnesota, Susie's talking about throwing snow 6 feet above her head or 6 feet tall drifts. That's why.
Yeah.
And if anyone heard the, hey, can I use your accounting module? I don't have a lot of money. Can I use it for free? That doesn't happen anymore. Sorry. Just want to make sure we got that clear.
And you had to be a sister.
You had to be a
By the
sister.
way, yeah.
And the whole washing windows things, we're still doing it. It's just not in your family. It's Nate's family. So our head of development, his son's coming in this summer
really?
to wash the windows.
They need it.
So it's kind of like it's all kind of circling back around
It
again. The
is,
family thing
yeah.
is just
Full
keeps coming
circle.
through.
So
Yeah.
now I understand where your pet peeve of dirty windows has come from.
Absolutely.
I think it's
yeah.
I think it went all the way down to Sandy too. It's driving her crazy right now.
Me
So
too. I
so
just had to
Susie, you've been at
decide.
RCC, you were helped your brothers out. You start to see the business grow. I mean, it went from 3, 4, 5, 6 of you to now 75 plus.
Yeah.
When and why do you see our business grow?
I think it really took off about the time Abby came on board, because I remember calling her and saying she was working for someone else. We did have a rule that most of the kids followed, that they had to work that they had to work
I'm a
somewhere
rule
else first.
breaker, you know
Well,
that.
you had special circumstances. But anyway, that they need to work somewhere else. So she was working somewhere else locally. And I remember calling her saying, okay, I think we're secure enough now that if you'd want to come and work for us, we're going to need to start hiring. And it was when we bought PSI, honestly. It was the purchase of PSI doubled our customer count overnight. When we signed those papers, all of a sudden we went from 200 companies to 400 companies, boom,
Wow.
like that. And, obviously we're going to need people, and which is why I approached Abby and others and said, and so I think I felt like at that point, that was where we were really turning the corner, and not that we haven't had struggles since, certainly, of course, anybody that runs a business knows that. There are times you think, okay, where am I going to get this next chunk of money? Because we have some big bills coming up, and so you battle that always. But I just felt, I hope not always, but I just felt like that was kind of the turning point for RCC, that you're doubling your size in a matter of no time. And then it was just, then we were so focused on how are we going to make this happen?
Mhm.
How are we possibly going to double our size
Mhm.
overnight? And so lots of meetings trying to decide what's going to be the best way to handle this. How can we make sure people are happy? Luckily, PSI was one of the softwares that we bought that actually can still run on machines today. Now, we never would have known that when we bought it. So there was a concern of, how can we get these people over? What happens if the software no longer works? What happens if you install it on new machines? There was always that worry. So it's how do we get the people over? But it's
Their support staff aligned with our values really well too, and they're still on board today, and that's what makes that package available. It would have probably died decades ago without Barry Barksdale. I'm going to give a shout out to Barry.
and
Barry
Larry
Barksdale
and
and Larry kept that thing ability
Running.
to run, but it's dead in time.
Right, absolutely, yes. And there are things that you just can't control, because I know anytime we've done acquisitions, we find it really important to keep staff. That we realize that while people love their software, they also really attach to staff too. And not only that, we didn't have the time or the ability to learn the new software. We depended on them to know and support their software. And so, even though I think any of the staff in any acquisitions we've done like to see the software work, there just becomes times that with no one maintaining that software any longer, that you can't run it on newer machines. It just isn't going to work. It just depends on the platform. So we were fortunate that one could still continue to run and have the staff to support it and run it, because we never had that kind of time to sit down and learn how to run a whole software from beginning to end, much less support it. So all of our acquisitions, we've just felt it's been key to get employees and keep employees in that acquisition.
I find it really interesting how you mentioned Abby came on at a pivotal point of growth at RCC. And I look back and it's almost all of the second generation co-ownership group came on board at moments of growth. It was Abby coming on at PSI. Myself, I came on at the front side of Mogo. Jess and Holly both came on after the acquisition of FuelPad. So how does that play into now bringing in the family members and having the rules and everything around it? how does that really play into creating the new departments and staffing those departments? Because you run out of a pool of family pretty quick. Our family, not as much. There's a lot of them out there.
We probably don't
And-
want any more.
That's very true. And we also live in a very small community of under 1,000 people. How have you been able to find the staffing to staff these new departments and these new business ventures?
Yeah, COVID actually has made that easier for us. When we hired staff prior to COVID, honestly, in a support position, it would take a solid year before we felt like a support person was up to speed. We couldn't find people locally that knew our software. Let's face it. Sheehan's Gas was there. They have one person running the RCC. We just weren't going to find people that knew our software. Well, since COVID hit, we realized a lot of people can work from home. And I'll shout out right now, RCC will never hire staff that are employed by one of our customers, ever. That would be a right pool for the picking, wouldn't it? But we've also noticed our industry is in an acquisition mode over the last number of years. And we know there are times that people lose their positions because of an acquisition. And so at that point, after COVID occurred, we realized that we could reach out to people that had lost their job and, say, are you interested in working at RCC? Well, we've already fought half the battle because they know how to work RCC. And we just have to teach them how to do the support side. So over the years, some contacted us, we contacted others. And I think it worked out great for both sides. We had people that needed jobs, knew the industry, knew our software. And boy, it cut down our training time to a matter of sometimes none. I mean, it was just teaching them our methods, teaching them our timekeeping system. And, it really did open up a whole new world for us where we could hire now, much to the chagrin of our payroll department, who then we'd say, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't have anybody yet in Texas, or we didn't have anybody in Arizona. So then, of course, they have to research all the rules for that particular state for payroll. So sorry, payroll department, but it really did open up our world to be able to hire.
I saw Nate over nodding when you said time billing system. There's been a few hours working on that in the last few years. So
I have to tell you, that was that's the first thing I dropped when I said, okay, I need to start backing off. I need to stop, and I stopped doing support and everything else. And finally went to the second generation one day and I said, I'd really like to stop doing time billing. I'll key it in. If I do have something billable for a customer, I'll key that in, but I don't want to key in, 50, 60 hours of just, here's what I did all week. So, and they went, yes. And I went, yes.
Sounds like she didn't want to be tracked on what she was really doing.
That's the real thing.
You don't want to know what I was really doing the last year. I've been
Can we
pretty out of
switch
it.
gears for a little bit here?
Absolutely.
So Brian.
Yeah.
Decides to say, hey, Sue, I really would
And
like
Kevin.
to join. Well, and Kevin, but
And
he
Kevin.
retired. Yep.
Yep.
But Brian says, I want to chase his dreams and go after the Lions, which is a huge commitment. He not here to help out. He's asking you to basically take over his role. So when he heard that he probably knew he was going to do something like this his whole life, probably, maybe not. Tell us the story about how that even started and what it meant to you and this company.
Yeah, the commitment to Lions at that time was a 7-year commitment, 3 years on the front side, a year being president, and 3 years on the back side of it. And so Brian actually came to both Kevin and I. That's why I said Kevin too.
Okay.
Because Kevin was still working for the company at that time. So, and the thing is, the commitment is 7 years, but you start running probably 2 or 3 years before, right?
Yep.
So you start running for that
and-
position.
Yep.
And so, we're talking probably 10 years ago, even more, because then COVID made his role 8 years instead of 7.
He's really proud of that, by the way. He was the only recorded person in history that was second vice president 2 years in a row.
Oh, sure, of course.
because
Yeah,
that's
he'd be the only one. Yeah, that's right. So he came to to Kevin and I and said, I'd really like to do this. And he told us, a 7-year commitment. And then it was really kind of fun because Brian would tend not to paint the whole picture. So we were accustomed to that. And
Really?
he said, but it'll really, the job will really just be weekend travel. And he had already done some traveling for lions. And I looked at him and I said, there is no such thing as a weekend trip to China. And he looked at me and said, oh, well, yeah, there'll be some of those. Yeah, there'll be some of those. But most of the time they're in the United States. And speaking of the man now who has been home 5 days, that's it. 5 days 2 years ago and 5 days this past year is all he's been home.
Wow.
So yeah, we knew it was bigger than what he was presenting to us. And so once we got that out of the way, we said, that's okay. We'll be fine. We've got great staff. We know that. I will tell you a story though, that a lot of people may not know. He was running for the Lions when my husband was pronounced terminal. And so, and that was like in June. And I know their national convention, it was in May. And I know their international convention is in June, meaning he had to be ready for the vote in June. And he backed out because he knew I had responsibilities at home. And that's like running for president, if you can think about it. When you back out, you don't always get back in the race again. And so he backed out that year. He backed out 10 years ago and said, this is not the right time for me to not be at the company. And so luckily he did get back in the race probably 2 years after that. Be 8 years. So he got back in the race like 2 or 3 years after that. And so he was elected third vice chair, and then of course took the steps up, and now he'll be on the backside. And since then, you weren't just the president for a year where you travel internationally. He then traveled for 2 years. 2 years ago, he was president of the Lions, and then this year, he was president of their foundation. So he's traveled internationally for 2 years. It turned out to be a little bit different than we expected.
A little more than weekend travel.
What a shock.
He got to meet his grandson for one day in there. And
There,
then
right.
he turned around and went back over. I think he was in India the next day after that.
Yes, right. Yeah. It was a big commitment, but we also knew it was important. We knew our dad was a Lion. So, we all grew up with it. We knew they were a great service organization. It's a worthy cause. And at that point, over the years, we've just learned we have really great staff. We have people that step in. Not only did I step out when my husband passed away, but so did Abby. So now you're taking 2 people out for a couple months. And you know what? That our department just kicked in and took our places while we were gone. That's what I think. And I think that's what a family does. That's why we've always said RCC isn't just RCC. RCC is a family. And so the people in our department stepped out. You were there then. You were a support person then. Yeah, you guys just all stepped up, and we stepped out of the picture for a couple months, and everybody stepped in and did our jobs. I probably kept up on a few emails, but really you took over it and, stepped in when other people couldn't be around.
And we do that for more than just family.
Oh,
That's why we say RCC is a family, and we do that for anyone that's in need of situations.
Our theory is that at one point or another, we're all going to be faced with our tragedy in our lives. And so, sometimes staff would come to us and say, well, why does that person get to work odd hours or whatever? And it's like, first of all, it's really none of your business. But second of all, so we would just tell people everybody's going to have times in their life when they need a break. It might be a divorce, it might be a death in the family, whatever it is, they're going to have some challenging times. So just know that we would do the same thing for you if you had something in your life. So let's just kind of let that go and we won't talk about it again, right? So it really was a corner of, and that was part of losing a spouse or losing someone. You realize that you do need times where you just need to kind of take a little bit of break. I'll be back, but somebody step in and do it while we're gone. So that's been a key cornerstone of the management RCC that said, we'll try to be as flexible as possible and find ways for you to handle the things that are thrown at you.
So you kind of had a plan that you were going to go work with your brothers at one point, as soon as the building was ready to be gone. I'm guessing there wasn't that much of a plan for bringing on your daughters and a nephew that's kind of a little crazy at times, and a niece.
We're all a little crazy.
So what was that like? What was your thought process when your offspring wanted to come in and a niece and nephew wanted to come in?
I don't think there was ever any great plan. We were just so busy then growing the business. It was crazy. We didn't really have much time to think. And so I think the reason I approached Abby at that time was, and so funny story, those of you that know Abby, she really had to analyze everything when she came across,
No,
so
that
What? Abby?
she had these sheets all written out with a yes, no column. And then she was figuring out money and she was figuring out all of this. And I said, honey, finally I had to look at her and say, you can't know what the future is going to be. there's still a risk there. I get that, but that's why we didn't really come to you until we knew that we were going to be really growing here. And I said, you can't put a number on what that's going to be like by the time you guys are in this position now. You don't know what that number is. I promise you, at this point, it looks like it's going to be better than what you're doing right now, but everything for her at that time was pretty even. The salary was pretty close. Everything was pretty even. And I said, I don't think you'd regret coming here. I think in the future it'll be okay. And she just kind of had to go with, that's not like Abby. You got to have everything figured out, right? And so I think it was just a matter of, we were all so busy. And then the next one, you came when Mogo was going to start. And, the younger girls came. It was just, I think those were points that we needed people, and you guys were accessible. But
the truth comes out.
There we go.
Gotta love the family.
Yeah, you do, don't you? No. And we had enjoyed it and assumed that all of you would enjoy it too. I don't know that there was ever a doubt about that. Knowing that there's really challenging times, I don't know that would have stopped any of us. It's just that's business. That's just a part of business. So why wouldn't you at that point, other than you'll be now working with your cousins and trying to figure all that out. But yeah, it just felt like the right thing to do at the time. I don't think there were any great big plans. It was just as those of you got older and became available, it's like, sure, this would be fine. It's a good timing. So.
And we were always told that we have to work 10 times harder and you're under a bigger microscope and you're easily replaceable.
Everybody's replaceable.
Everyone's replaceable.
We always
Yep.
said, I mean, there is no one in this company that can't be replaced, including myself, including Brian. I mean, yeah, we're not irreplaceable. So if we said it to you, it was because we knew the same thing. So yeah, it just felt like good timing and felt like it was the right thing to do, and thought we'll handle the rest and see how it turns out. See if you all like it, if you enjoy it, and if you're gonna be able to handle it.
Working with the cousins too, that if you asked me 7 or 8 years ago what that was like, I think I would have had a much different answer and outlook on the future than I do today. And part of that was because of some choices that you and Dad had made on bringing in some consultants to kind of help guide this process and this relationship building, not only amongst what is family as an ownership group, but also the longevity of staff that we've had.
Absolutely. And I think we learned early on, I was just talking to one of our customers about this yesterday or today, and said, when Brian, Kevin, and I were there, we tried to be able to have knowledge in each of the departments. And we pretty much could. Kevin was a developer by trade, and so he knew that. So we felt like we had a cover over all of them. When Kevin retired, we really had to do a fact check and go, okay, we so trust Nate. Nate is in charge of the developers, so trust him, but we no longer had anyone that knew that area. And so I think over the years, we learned that we can't cover every area. And so when we got to starting to groom the second generation, what we had in place didn't work very good. And so one day I finally said, we've got to do something different. Kevin and Brian was gone by then. So Kevin and I just can't groom the second gen like we need to. And so I actually reached out to my son. I do have a son who's older than the girls, and he used to work for Emerson Corporation. And I remembered him telling me years ago that Emerson would pay someone to come in and they would have peer reviews. And my son being, a little bit arrogant, and he thought he had the world by the tail. And he did a peer review with Brian Follick's dad.
Oh, wow.
Did a peer review and got knocked down a few notches. And I thought, that's what we need. We need somebody like that can, that can work with us. And so I called him and said, can you tell me who that was? And he said, they still do it, only now they are a second generation business. So when Eric was at Emerson, he worked with the dad, Brian's dad. Then Brian also was in the business. So we contacted them as psychologists and said, and their specialty is multi-generational businesses, how to transition them. And so, I thought it was just going to be a short time thing, get us over the hump, teach these kids how to be leaders. And I thought we'd be done, but I don't know, we might keep him on retainer for a number of years yet. He's just, we've found more homes. We've found great uses for that strategy. And obviously Kevin and I felt like we were totally out of our realm of how we're going to get the kids to come in. Plus we're family. And so really, I'll tell anybody that was one of the best decisions we made. And over the years, as you know, we maybe didn't need him as much for that, but we did. We also found great use for him to be able to work with our leadership group and say, how do you gear anybody to leadership positions? And he's been great with that. We offer it to, as you know, we offer it to staff. We also have found it a really great way to discuss with an employee that they might not be the right fit for us, because we basically let them meet with them first. He goes through it and says, you know, and just ask them a number of questions and said, you know, maybe this isn't the job for you. Maybe there's other positions that you would enjoy more. And it's been a fabulous way to part ways with someone who really isn't a good fit for RCC. Then we say, okay, you can have whatever 3 months till you can find another job that might be a better fit, and both sides are happier. So we found a lot of uses for his services.
I think a lot of our staff have seen the changes too, between building the leadership team, them advocating or advising the ownership, and just keeping all of our staff involved with everything. And you can just see it just kind of build. And it's really incredible to know that you guys hired outside help with these changes. And we're going to get to the changes on Thursday, so we'll kind of let that be. But you know, when people are like, what's happening, the transitions between Susie retiring, who's going to be the owners, and Brian's still doing his thing. So what's all happening? And it's like, I don't think they realize that you've been working with this Brian Follick, this outside help, this business psychologist, therapist, whatever his title is. I mean, you're paying for his help.
Right.
What do we need to do emotionally and physically and financially to transition the ownership? And I've just witnessed it, saying, everyone just take a deep breath. It's going to even be better than it was. So let's talk about retirement, because that's why we're here.
Sure.
So Susie, when did you decide, what was it in your life that you said, I had enough of my daughters and my crazy nephew and
Or the 2 o'clock in the morning nights.
2 o'clock in the morning nights and then falling asleep in meetings and snoring on the Zoom calls. And
I know.
By the way.
I know. I read that page in the book and I'm like, wow, everybody talks about me snoring and sleeping. And I'm like, wow, did I ever work? I'm teasing. You know, I think it was kind of gradual. It really was. It felt like the right time. And I'll be 68 this year. So I thought, you know, it's time. I just thought it's time to do, you know, the things I've wanted to do for years. Because I, you know, I've set some things aside, just thinking, like even reading books. I love to read books, but once I start a book, I'm voracious and I just want to read it till it's done. And that couldn't happen when you were working the kind of hours I was working. So yeah, I play piano, I play golf, I do pickleball. So I was looking forward to doing more of that. And it just seemed like the right time. And it seemed like in our working towards the second gen taking over, it felt like it was the right time. And it needed to take a long time, because I felt like a gradual transition was easier than waking up one day and saying, you know, 6 months from now, I'm going to be gone. And so we've been planning this for a very long time. And it was it's been a very gradual exit. Very purposefully, there were times where I just had to keep backing off of things. You know, I got to quit doing the time billing. That was the number one. No, but then I'd start to attend less meetings. I eventually got to the point, I was telling some of our customers that I got to the point where even if I was in a meeting, I realized I was still talking too much. And so I just said to the kids, I'm going to start doing the meetings from home, because if I have to hit the unmute button, I make myself stop and think, do I really need to say this? Is it important? Or is somebody else going to say it? Or maybe enough doesn't even need to be said. So in that aspect, I was able to kind of step away, because I think it's really hard in a family business to step in until the others start to move. And so it was a very conscious effort to keep diminishing my role at RCC. And I really haven't worked a lot for RCC in the last year, other than now, of course, doing a lot of the paperwork, for the buyouts. But yeah, it was a very gradual. So it just felt like the right time, and then it just is going to take time to happen. Yeah.
So I have a 2-part question. I put you on the hot seat.
You know, I'm getting older. I hope I can remember both questions.
Your memory's still there for the most part.
Well, for the most part.
So how do you feel about the second generation taking over ownership? And the second part of that, what do you feel is our biggest risk going forward?
I think I'm comfortable with the second gen taking over. I know they'll have battles, but so did we. I know they'll have struggles, but so did we. I know they'll have tough times, but so did we. So why would I think that it should be any easier or any different than what it was for us? Other than you're coming into a more established business than what either the boys or myself came into. So you are coming into an established business. We've not only work to make the people side of this transition work, but there were a number of decisions that have been made in the last probably 8 years in how we do business, changes that we've made, going to subscription pricing, doing a lot of changes that have been made behind the scenes that we wanted to make sure we could set you up with as stable as a company as we could. And so a lot of financial decisions were made along the way, because there's a tremendous number of dollars that roll through RCC on all sides of it, and the numbers are daunting. And so to come in as young people and look at those numbers and start making decisions based on those numbers, we thought would be pretty daunting. So we made some tough calls probably 4 or 5 years ago that I think set it up so that hopefully you don't have those great big decisions to make right away and can kind of work your way into that. So I feel comfortable with that. What was the second part? See, I told you.
See, you did
Forgot.
I know. Once I get my mind going.
What do you feel is our biggest challenge?
Oh, I think with any multi-generational business, I think the biggest challenge, I see so many businesses that when I look at the people who did it, the first generation just leads a different, probably for what I just said. They just have a different start to it. It's hard, it's tough. You're putting your own houses up. You're putting everything you have on the line for your business to succeed. And hopefully by the time the second generation comes in, that's a little bit better. So, but I also think there's really a lot to be learned by coming through the tough times. And so we've said that to the second generation too. We're exiting now, but you're going to have some tough times, but that's okay. That's what builds your character. That's what, makes you tough down the road and makes you really fight for it, because you have had to fight for it. But I think what I see most often is I think there's with second generation who maybe didn't have to come through some of that, you don't want them to ever feel that they're entitled to this, that they're entitled to anything. I think I've strived really hard to say, I don't expect anybody at RCC to do something that I don't already do or haven't already done. And so I think coming in, it's important to start as you all did, which is you're starting out in support. You don't start at the top, you start at the bottom and kind of work your way through it. So I think the most danger is feeling that, you're somehow entitled, or, that you're going to get big heads and, we're in charge and we're doing that. And I think you're doing a great job of that. So I just want to see that continue.
Oh, I appreciate all that you've done for me over the last 10 years and even growing up. And I want to personally say I appreciated sending me down the hard paths and also being my buffer between Kevin.
There's a lot of people that need a buffer between Kevin sometimes. I was normally the mediator. Not only did they come across the street for votes, but because I was between Brian and Kevin, we were kind of the three last ones, I tended to be the buffer between them too. So I was the middle person long before I met all of you. So I just continued to be it, I guess.
Well, Sue, you had a bunch of questions from Kyle and I, and thank you so much for being on the podcast. But I'm thinking there's some people out there that have some questions for you. So we're going to open it up now.
Okay.
So if anyone's brave enough to raise their hand, grab a microphone, and share a Susie story. Oh, come on. Somebody has something to say. Mark from Right Services, you were given some compliments yesterday and said, save this for Susie's story.
Well, Susie, I've been in the propane business 13 years. I've been in other industries and worked with other programming companies. And I'll have to tell you, from my experience of over 35 years after high school, your company is number one. I've never picked up the phone and had anybody get mad, be inconsiderate. It's always friendly. And that's what you've got there. You got some of the best people, and don't let that go.
Hands
Keep
down.
them.
Yeah.
Because those people will keep you growing. We love you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I will tell you, one of the greatest things that ever happened, I would say, but Kevin and Brian would probably agree, is in 2011, we weren't named it. RCC was named Small Business Persons of the Year for Minnesota. And, you know, we knew darn well that wasn't us. That was not the four owners at that time. That was the people that were inside RCC and across the nation. That was not us. It was the staff. And we've always truly believed that, Mark. We work really hard to get good people and keep good people and hopefully treat them right.
All right, Tony. It's time. Susie, enjoy the video.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, now I'm gonna cry.
Hey Susie, this is Chad from Belky Bottle Gas. Congratulations on retiring and hopefully playing more golf than I do. You know, I'm kind of envious. Home A is on the golf course, home B is on the golf course. You just get to decide whether you want to be in Minnesota or Scottsdale. So good luck, and hopefully you get to see a bunch of your friends along the way, and hopefully we run into each other again at some point.
Hi, Sue from sunny New Zealand. Man, I just want to tell you, you've been an absolute inspiration to me. I remember the days when you came out to New Zealand and you helped us through some really, really difficult transition points. And I think that just shows the type of person that you are. You put everything into everything that you do. You took time out of your personal life to come and help us. And everybody in New Zealand just remembers you with a fond, fond heart. Susie, wishing you the very, very best for your retirement. I just hope that you stay away from RCC and enjoy your time.
Hey, this is Jessica Balderston. I am part of the second generation taking over at the company. I am currently in Australia with my dad, Brian Sheehan, attending the LCIF International Convention. And we both are so bummed that we couldn't make it, but we're cheering on Susie from the sidelines overseas. I just wanted to tell Susie, thank you for being my mentor throughout the years. I started here 10 years ago, and you have been with us every step of the way as a tremendous leader of this company. No matter how chaotic your day was, you always made time to answer questions from employees, and I instilled that into myself and hope to do the same, bringing that level of leadership to our company in the future. I just wanted to tell you congratulations on your retirement, and it's well deserved. I hope you're able to take time for you and your family to do all the things that you want to accomplish, as well as being an even better seasoned pro at pickleball. So hopefully maybe my husband and I can challenge you and Kurt to a match in the future. Just know you left the company in great hands with the second generation, and we plan on leading for many years to come with the same ethics that you and Dad instilled to us. So Susie, again, congratulations on your retirement, and we couldn't have wished it on anybody else in the future, and we just are excited for your retirement.
Hey, Sue, congratulations on your retirement. It's been a lot of years, and I don't know what I'd have done without you a lot of the times. Every time I called, you answered, even if it was in the middle of the night and you were in Scottsdale. Hang in there, and this isn't the end for us. I'll fly out to see you sometime, I promise. Bring Tori and Ashton with me, and just gonna miss you. You take care now. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. Susie, I want to tell you first I love you, and I want to show you something this morning. This is a 2010 RCC pad that I have kept, 2010. But you know, RCC has always been a big part of my life, Freeman Gas life, and I want to thank you and your team for bringing Freeman Gas from just delivering gas to doing scheduling and special deliveries and routing and all the things that y'all brought to us. And I want to wish you a very, very special retirement. And I want to tell you one more thing. If I ever come to Bird Island, I can find you because you are the lady that wears the pretty shoes. Love you.
Hey Susie, Larry Sheehan. It's been great getting to know you over the last 25 plus years, and we appreciate everything that you've done for us and bringing us, as Jim said, along the way and getting us from prehistoric ages up into the computer age. We really appreciate you. Love you to death. Good luck with your retirement, and feel free to reach out anytime if there's anything you need from us.
Hi there, I'm Brian Sheehan. I'm one of the owners of RCC and one of Susie's brothers. Just a quick shout out to say how much of a joy it has been working with Susie. She's always been awesome. Well, not always awesome. You know how siblings can be growing up sometimes. Yeah, we can be annoying to each other.
I don't like him.
Why?
Because he's so noisy.
But we're family.
You want to throw him away?
Yeah. Get back.
And yeah, sometimes we want to throw each other away, but we gotta hug each other as well. We have a fabulous family. And we do get along. And we can be loud at our family reunions sometimes. And yeah, we can have our differences as well. But we always came together as family. We shared when we could. But actually, it wasn't that bad growing up with Susie. After we grew up and came home from college, we've always gotten along. I'm not going to mention the time that she hit me in the head with a baseball bat, or she'd tell on me with mom and dad. And actually, we had a hard time convincing our customers that we were brothers and sisters when we traveled on site sometimes. But seriously, I'll be forever grateful for her running RCC with her common sense and her great leadership. I will never forget how she allowed me over the last couple of years to pursue what I wanted to be able to do as well. It's so great to be part of a tight family, and as in not all the businesses, families don't always get along. It was easy for us, as we always have thought the same. We know that we have the best stuff and the best customers and the best staff because of how you have built their relationship, Susie. And you are leaving the company and our customers feeling great about the second generation and owners because of the guidance. Everyone is in the best of hands, and it's in regards to thanking of you. Enjoy your retirement, that you've deserved it and you've earned it. You've made it happen. Thank you, Susie. Enjoy life, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you for joining Kyle and Freddie's podcast, Fuel the Conversation.
A podcast for fuel people by fuel people. We really hope you enjoyed today's topics and you found them interesting, and we hope that you pulled some value out of our conversation today.
To hear more podcasts from Kyle, myself, and special guests, you can catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or the iTunes Store.
To find out more information on RCC, you can visit our website, www.rccbi.com. You can also find us on Facebook under Rural Computer Consultants, also under LinkedIn under Rural Computer Consultants, or go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at RCC Inc. 79.
If you'd like to contact us directly, email us at sales@rccbi.com.
This is Kyle signing off.
And this is Freddie.
Until next time.